This is the Leadway Wealth Builders Podcast, episode 187. And today I'm going to be breaking down the answer on how do I get started. I've been getting asked this a lot, and I wanted to do a quick podcast episode on it because I think a lot of newbies, they start looking other places, but there are 3 questions that they need to be able to answer themselves before they do anything. So if you haven't listened to this podcast before, this is the Leadway Wealth Builders Podcast with me, Chris Rickenbaugh. I am documenting my journey in real estate and business and also bringing on high-level investors to share their stories about how they built their businesses. You can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at chris.rickenbaugh. That's chris.reicenbach. And if you're listening to this podcast, thank you so much. Leave us a like, rating, and review because that is the only way this podcast can grow and reach more people. And you can also listen on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and Podbean, and I think we're on Amazon as well. So let's hop into today's topic of how do I get started? So one big quote that really changed a lot of my thinking is the quality of your life is determined by the quality of questions you ask yourself. And I don't think a lot of people are asking the right questions, and that's something I'm still learning as I'm, diving deeper into some different areas of business and in real estate. Because in the beginning, real estate for me started as this thing to, hey, I understand this enough to be able to go and make money. And that's where it was. I needed to be able to bring in income, and I understood it enough. And for what I was listening to about building wealth, that seemed like the right move. So now that I'm in it, I'm able to ask some different questions because, going through some different challenges over the past year and a half, I've really been able to see this different perspective on real estate. And then you kind of get introduced to this thing over here, and it makes you really think back on real estate of, well, is this the point? So I wanted to break down a couple questions because I've been going to some meetups and I've been getting asked a little bit more of, how do I get started? And I think I'm in a really good position to be able to help answer these questions for newbies because you're the best person to help the person you were yesterday. So for me, who just got started a year and a half ago, I was asking all these questions too. Nobody really wanted to talk to me because it's really intimidating to be able to go and ask somebody with a lot of experience, hey, where do I start? I have no knowledge, nowhere to start here. So I wanted to be able to break down a couple things for newbies on where to get started because I've been answering this for a couple times and I just felt like a good podcast about it. So the best question to start is, what do I truly want? And for a lot of people, it's, I want to quit my job. I want to have more time. However, they're not really thinking deeper. They're just thinking in the present, hey, what do I want in this current moment? So a lot of people are working these W-2 jobs and they're trying to, find a way out, find more time, and they hear that real estate is, a good option. So for all transparency, I am going to be going down the real estate topic for that, or for this episode in particular, but this works for any space you're in. So what I'm recommending to these people is do the perfect day exercise. So what this is you write down what a perfect day would be like for you. Say 10 years down the road, money's no option. You can live where you want. You can drive what you want. You can wake up when you want. You can eat what you want. Everything about your life is perfect in this scenario, and write down exactly what that day would be. Because what happens is you're able to give yourself a destination. And I talk about this a lot is, a GPS doesn't work unless you put in a destination. So what you're doing by this is you're giving yourself a destination to be able to reach towards, to be able to look towards. And everybody's going to be a little bit different. So with being able to do this at the end of this exercise, you give yourself the destination, and then the how-to is going to be able to figure itself out. So when you ask the question of what do I truly want, this is what you write down. Hey, your perfect day, this is what I ideally want in the next 10 years, or 10 years down the road, this is my perfect day. This is what I want to get to. Okay, perfect. now we can really get started, because then you move on to the next question of, when do I want it? So you could say, hey, 10 years, you could have a wife and a kids, and, this is what your perfect day looks like. But now you put the timeline on it, because now it's starting to become reality. Because if you just say, hey, this is a perfect day for me, and you don't put a time on it, then it's always going to kind of remain out there. You're never going to give yourself a deadline to be able to achieve it. So by saying, when do I want it, you give yourself a deadline. And what that does in, the back of your mind is it starts to, start working the gears on figuring out how to get there. You don't have to have the answer right away, and you're not going to. But it allows you to start kind of looking in that direction is, okay, where or what is going on right now to be able to get to that point? So that leads to the final question of, where are you right now? So let's just say you're working a W-2 job, you're making, $70,000 a year, you're a little bit comfortable, but there's something bigger out there, and that when you have a wife and kids and a family, that you're not going to be able to just do that in your current job, and you want a little bit more out of life. So you do the perfect day exercise, you give yourself a destination to be able to go to, and you say, hey, I want to get this in the next 10 years. So you're able to take where you are right now, and now you have the beginning point, and now you have the end point. And that's where the how-to is going to be able to figure itself out, because those two big questions are answered. And then you can start looking, is real estate the right way? Is business buying the right way? Is working up in my W-2 more beneficial for me? And where I see a lot of newbies starting at, and the questions I've been getting is, how do I get started? And I ask, what do you want? And they're like, and they haven't really thought about it. And that's not a bad thing. That's where everybody starts. They just hear that real estate is a good idea. They hear that buying business and business is a good idea and can make a lot of money, but they're not really tying that to the end goal of, where is this end point? Because you could get into real estate, you could start flipping houses, and, it's like, okay, well, what now? It's like, you replace your income, now what? It's like, oh, well, I guess I'll just keep doing this and growing it. It's like, but to what end? There always has to be this destination and this end point, because you don't know. Otherwise, you're just out there kind of doing it. You're not really doing it, moving towards a goal. You're not progressing towards anything. So when you give yourself that destination, you're able to build towards something. And that perfect day could always change a year, 2-3 years out from now. But the main point is, where you're going. So when, I'm getting asked that question in particular, and it's like, okay, real estate is the way to go, but what part of real estate? If you like your W-2 job, could you make a little bit more money in your W-2 and then, buy a couple rentals on the side? So, you bump your income from $70,000 to $100,000, and you can afford to be able to put a couple rentals aside, be able to figure out, some creative options to put some low money down, like seller financing or subject to be able to build some equity and some wealth? Or are you saying, hey, I want to do this a lot quicker? And then real estate, it could be flipping and wholesaling. So that's going to be a little bit more hands-on. You're probably not going to be able to do much from your W-2 from that standpoint. So you're going to have to go dive in a little bit more. And then, but the thing is, you can bump up your ceiling. So instead of making $100,000 a year in a W-2, maybe you could make $200,000 to $250,000. And that's going to be a little bit more for you. Maybe that's what you want by flipping, 10, 15 houses a year. And that's nothing insane for what a lot of people do, but that's a really good amount of income for what you want. But then again, it always comes back to, what do you truly want? So if you're saying, hey, I want to live out in Hawaii. I want to have $100,000 coming in a month to be able to afford to live out there. If we're going to be doing that, we probably have to be making close to $1 million a year, or a very comfortable income. So for me, for flipping houses, I looked at that and went, flipping houses, I'm going to have to figure out how to do it remote, which isn't impossible. And I'm going to have multiple streams of income coming in. And if I want to do it by the time I'm 30, then I have to really shorten that time gap, and I really have to look at the income point. So where does that point me to? It doesn't rule out real estate. It just kind of points me in this different direction of, hey, I can't, rely on a couple $100 of rental income coming in. I have to look a little bit bigger. So that's where we look into business buying, and we're looking into hotels and mobile home parks. So it all starts with that perfect day exercise and figuring out what you truly want, because that destination is going to be able to propel you so much farther. And, you're just going to be able to, put the how together after you figure out the beginning and the end. So that's what I wanted to break into right before this Thanksgiving weekend. So hopefully everybody has a great Thanksgiving. There is going to be an episode coming out on Friday. It's not going to be an interview, but we will have more interviews coming up. So thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Leadway Wealth Builders podcast with me, Chris Rickenbaugh. We'll see you on the next one.